I think first and foremost, it's important to say this, and I don't think I can say it enough, that someone that is here and is not entitled to stay needs to go home, and that's the reality of things. The solution is not to give visas to absolutely everyone simply because they don't want to leave. This is what they agreed to do.
They were promised, Minister.
They were made promises. I understand that people have made promises to them, and I think that is where the human aspect of this comes into play. What I've tried to do within my department is to make sure, because of the labor, because there is some skilled labor and people are qualified in a lot of fields where we need people, is to make sure that we focus a little more on domestic draws into our permanent residency pools. I've directed my department, I've directed provinces to focus more on the PNP draws internally instead of going abroad and bringing in even more folks where you have this talented pool here. That doesn't clear up the entirety of the situation that we see today. The expiration of postgraduate work permits is something that we are monitoring closely over the course of the next few years, and it's going to be a rough ride. Part of cleaning up this challenge that we see will mean that people's hopes will be dashed to some extent. But again, no one was guaranteed automatic permanent residency, and ideally we would have the bad actors pay for the promises that they falsely created. Someone has made money along this. It wasn't the federal government, other than indirectly through taxes. Universities, colleges have all made money. Provinces have made money. The books in Ontario have been balanced on the backs of international students. I'm not inventing this as a matter of political rhetoric. It's clearly been said in some of the budget analyses that have been provided with respect to the province of Ontario. That's a reality that I'm going to have to deal with the Ontario government and have an honest conversation about how we fix this. But it isn't up to the federal government to clean this up entirely, because we didn't create this in the first place. Probably should have been better oversight. That's water under the bridge. And again, the criticism is that I've leveled on myself, as I probably trusted these people too long. But it's something that has ended, and we'll continue to monitor. If the federal government has to take more measures with respect to these institutions, I know some are closing down, probably for the right reasons. It will. In a federal system like Canada, provinces have jurisdiction, but with that jurisdiction comes some responsibility that I feel hasn't been exercised appropriately. But I'm here to do it. Sadly, or hopefully, depending how you see my role, my job isn't just to stamp 500,000 visas a year. It looks at the entire ecosystem, looks at needs, looks at job creation, job loss. It looks at the intellectual capacity of Canada, the societal acceptance of bringing people into the country, and we adjust accordingly. Sometimes we get it right, and indeed I think on balance over the last 10 years we've gotten it right, and sometimes we don't get it as right as we should have. You know, I think in housing it's a problem that's been created over the last 3 decades, and you can't solve it over the course of a few years. That is just the reality. The federal government's been out of federal housing for about 30 years. It's only Justin Trudeau and the programs that we put into place that have started to address the supply of housing and the federal government's involvement in this. It's probably a failure across the system to deal with that, and it's a bit of a problem that's been in the making for, regardless of the government, it's been in place for about 3 decades. I think regardless of these sort of, I'm not saying, I don't take them seriously by calling them blips, but the market goes up and the market goes down. I think the need for sustained federal investment will be important, so that we don't cause this in another 10 years when people suddenly say, well, where was the federal government? It is a provincial responsibility. Doesn't mean the federal government shouldn't be investing it. A government like ours is active in making sure that we're in the business of supply. With mortgage rates coming down, with interest rates coming down, you see that attractiveness and the ability of people to be able to buy houses going up a bit. There's a lag, you don't know yet, but you also see the price line of houses kind of stabilized as a result, or even going up. So we do have to adjust to that. I think in my role, the most important thing and decision that I took is what economists look a little more intimately than more people expect, which is what the population progression is. And in the last levels plan, that is much more complete than any other levels plan that we've ever provided. One, because we fold in temporary residents into the numbers was the stabilization of the population growth and even a population drop in year 3, if our plan does bear out through the last 3 years. So that'll be very important for me, people making, it'll reduce the number of housing starts that we need to generate. It's more or less confirmed by the Parliamentary Budget Officer, probably, in fact, as close as we've ever gotten when it comes to that type of scrutiny. So that's a positive sign, but doesn't mean that it absolves us from our need to continually invest. And I think I would expect the next leader of the Liberal Party to make those commitments as well, because I think we've learned our lessons from getting out of the business for about 30 years. It's collective responsibility. That number that you're quoting is a bit of a trailing indicator, but it is one of the reasons why we made a number of these policy adjustments and clamped down on the system in general, and ready to do more. But I've done 2 waves of clampdowns in the last little while. We've seen results where it has prevented a large number of instances of fraud. Verification letters are very important. There's a lot of responsibility, frankly, on the universities that are welcoming people to take responsibility for these people that are paying exorbitant fees just to show up in Canada. It doesn't make sense that if you're paying that much money, you suddenly turn your back when the person doesn't show up in your classroom, right? And that is Canadian state doesn't follow everyone's comings and goings. That's the reality. I don't track you. Just the conspiracy theorists think we track you guys. No, we don't, and that's the reality. I'm not being cavalier about this, but the reality is that they did get a visa. They were expected to go study, and for one reason or another, there's a large number of people that didn't do so. They may have abused of the ability to go work in whether it's underground or legitimately, and that's something I think we need to follow a little more closely. It isn't just the federal government, it's provincial governments, it's institutions that have perhaps even entertained false hope. People have paid a lot of money just to get in here, and then if they disappear, it's not right. You're expected to study, and if you're not, you shouldn't stay here. That's why some of the clampdown has been so important, to make sure that we are actually getting in legitimate students into this country, and I think we've seen that largely. I'm prepared to do more if need be, if I see this trend continuing. My sense is that it has dropped. Is it perfect? That I think remains to be seen. It's very difficult right now for even some of the top institutions that weren't doing all that much wrong. It's more difficult to recruit. I think we need to make sure that the Canadian brand does focus on excellence, on quality, and less quantity. And clearly, I'm ready to do more, but it'll require a rebranding exercise, but also a rework with universities and colleges and provinces. Important to make that responsibility, to make sure that we are following people more closely in their academic journey. Because again, we're talking about a younger set of the population, our kids, that we need to follow closely and make sure that they're being properly accompanied when they come into Canada legitimately, including, during the, and I'll say another thing about the asylum-seeking numbers, including during the academic journey, but also after, if they are working, to make sure it's actually matching with the education they got and the promise that they were implicitly given. On the asylum-seeking numbers with students, the trend, I'd be foolish to say we didn't expect the trend to increase given the volumes. We see some of the institutions that are closing some of their programs down now had the higher number of asylum seekers. But let's bear in mind that, again, if you follow the money, those institutions took the money. Now the asylum-seeking process is one that it weighs financially on the backs of the government of Canada. I'm prepared to do more with illegitimate claims. It doesn't make sense that if you come here, spend a year, and you didn't have the conditions in your country to cause you to be an asylum seeker on day one, that a year later or 2 years later, and unless there was something that happened in your home country or some individual circumstance that made you fear for your life, which is often rare, that you should be entitled to a process that would drag on and on. So I'm prepared. Parliament is prorogued currently. I am prepared to introduce a bill in Parliament, or even take other measures, whether it's by regulation or others, to make sure that those cases in particular are dealt with in a more efficient fashion. I don't disagree with you that these cases, they need to be dealt with fairly but swiftly. I don't have the facts about the Milton jail, and I wouldn't speculate on it, but certainly given what we've done last year, those are important numbers, but it is important for people to get an expedited process. I won't comment on what the U.S. is doing. We're following it closely. Some of it looks the way it looks to all of you, but I mean, we need to take care of our business at home.
Can I add into that one? Look, our judicial system, that those cases are under provincial jurisdiction. It's up to province and the courts. They have to decide their cases. In the last 3 years, 54% of the cases have not been addressed or either withdrawn or is dismissed. The people who are in jail, it's a provincial responsibility. We cannot deport them unless case decide their case. If there's charges, they have charges. That's what the Constitution we have. So I think it's the people who are there. Once their case has been finalized, then I think it's we are able to send them back. But Minister has taken very swift action, and he's. I mean, these are the things already under consideration. That person was here, came for study, but never gone to school, or there's no consistency or criminal activity. Obviously, it will be dealt with accordingly. Yeah, I just want to. We have Arfa Muzaffar. She's here. She runs radios 770 AM. Very senior journalist and.
Red FM.
Oh yeah, Red FM. Yeah. So they joined us late. So can we have a quick and short, not long question, please?
Hi, Marc.
I want to give everyone the opportunity.
KCXL Media, it's really nice seeing you.
Nice to see you.
I, in fact, have two very small questions. The first one is that immigration in itself is not being fairly done spread over countries, especially Pakistan, like deny them, not even the student, but the visit visa itself. So why is that being continuing till now not taken care of? The second question is the very statement that Canada becoming the 51st state, if not the tariffs are implemented. The rumors, this is a talk of the town, and this is the immigration would be, of course, affected because of this thing. So how do you really have?
Yeah, the 51st state stuff is not going to happen. It's really over my dead body. Let's be honest. We're all Canadian. It's not, we need to reject that. So I'll leave it at that. I think everyone here is proud to be Canadian, and there isn't a chance there's not a chance in hell we'll ever become American. Yeah. Look, my two of my kids were born in New York City. They're still proud Canadians. It's not that we don't have kinship and love for our neighbors and the American people. We just disagree wholeheartedly with the rhetoric that's coming from the administration. I don't agree with you that it's not fair. I do understand some of the challenges with the processing center in Islamabad. It is currently staffed up more than it has been before as part of our commitments. I would say this, though, that as part of some of the measures that I've had to take since, I would say, less than a year, we have had to be more stringent on visa processing and visa permits. That has affected visa processing, not the effective ability of the personnel to do their jobs, but it's resulted in more rejections from countries like Pakistan. It's resulted in a significant number of rejections in countries like India and Bangladesh, where we had seen disproportionate claims of asylum seeking in comparison to the numbers of visas that were in theory for people that were to come here as tourists. So sometimes we don't necessarily get everything right. It's not a right to come to Canada as a tourist. It's really a privilege. People have to respect the terms of the visa, and I did ask my department to be a bit more strict on some of the issuances of the visas, and that has impacted countries where there have been higher levels of asylum seeking through the I believe what is an abuse of the visa system. It's no surprise to anyone that in the large numbers of folks that have come from the north to the south into the U.S. and that the U.S. has seen and complained to us about, even though they send us larger numbers, a lot of folks have come through airports at Montreal and at Pearson, and that's not right. I mean, we need to be able to have a proper control over the issuance of our visas. Those are changes that I've been able to effect over the last 6 months. And that's probably some of the stuff that you're seeing, but I wouldn't say that it's unfair. It's the result of the, I would say, historic volume that we are facing with people wanting to come to Canada.
So, Minister, it's just can we give a clarity? You said you have more staff in Islamabad immigration.
Visa,
Yeah.
like,
We have had-
processing center is not opening a lot of.
It is working, it is up and working. It is not sort of on the same scale of what we are seeing in Manila. But the assurances that I have from my staff is that we have the number of personnel working in Islamabad. There are other files that get processed through our global network, and I would say even with respect to any country.
There's not a status of visa processing center in Islamabad.
Well, we have personnel that's now accredited. It did take time. There were some issues with accreditation of some of the personnel that we sent over, but they are there, and to the best of my knowledge, they are working.
Is there some, we heard that the government of Pakistan have some issues with that, they were not providing.
Initially, there were some challenges with visas, but I think that's resolved.
It was there because we had, Ambassador Janjua. I had a meeting with him. There was an issue.
That's largely resolved. Right?
But it's not. It's over. Okay, Mr. Lodi. So I
been
request,
very
we only
patient.
have
You've
10
been very
minutes,
patient.
so please keep it short.
question, I think.
No, there's few people who came before you. Yes.
My question, my name is Shahman from Young and Snow News. My question is, two tenures you already done, but still in the advisory to Pakistan. What your opinion, because it's not for advisory finished to other government or other party, Liberal parties maybe finish this advisory in Pakistan.
Okay, so you're talking about the Pakistan has advisory. Do we travel advisory?
Pakistan is still on the travel advisory of Canada.
Yeah, that is something that is
a global
administered
affair.
by Global Affairs.
Global affair. That's not immigration.
And it's about the safety of people. Again, and
Yeah.
I don't like comparing one country to another, and you may say one country is more safe than the other, but it's one that's determined by Global Affairs Canada to make sure that we're taking care of people traveling to those countries.
Ji, Tosif bhai?
Yes, what are the numbers of immigrants you are expecting this year? And what about the parental and grandparents application?
So as part of the levels announcement that I made in October, rather, we did a reduction of 20%. So that translates from the high of 485,000 permanent residents this year. It was going to go up to 500,000. We dropped it to 395 this year. And then I believe next year about 380 and then 365. So, it's a reduction of 20%. That does affect families. We've increased parents, grandparents, families, spouses, children category significantly under our government. We had to reduce that category as well. Whenever you have to reduce categories, it's a difficult decision. We had to do that on our humanitarian component and the economic portion. Just for everyone's benefit, it's about a 60-20-20 split. But everyone had to be affected by that. So that's the reality, and I think within that category, prioritizing spouses and such was very important in there. It means that some people will have to wait a bit longer, but it made sense in the context of reducing levels where the country is telling us to please adjust the volume levels so we can have a better control of migration into Canada.
Okay, Arfa Baji, please.
Honorable Minister, thank you very much for giving thank you very much for giving us a chance to meet the Honorable Minister. My two questions. The first question is, I understand immigration is mass at the moment, and especially when we talk about the students, all the students from India. Unfortunately, those students, they were given a bait by those who brought them. They provided them with a fake document. What is the system, our system, that those agents who brought these students or who were working behind, they made all the fake documents, and our system could not verify that those documents are fake, right or wrong. For example, the submission where this man, he brought around 700 students from India, and their admission was in one of the finest colleges here. What is the problem with our system that we couldn't find, and our system couldn't find that those documents are fake documents? I have a recorded interview with me where this boy said his father is a peon. He was in a school. Some agent who brought him, he did grade 10. The man who brought him, he provided his master's certification. They did not have no money in the account, and he provided a statement of around 700,000 in his account, came from India. I do have that recording. What is the problem with our system that we couldn't find that those documents were fake? Number one. Number two, when Canada invites people from around the world, and I believe their policy should be same for all the countries. Especially when I spoke to some of the universities here, their universities say they don't want to invest on the students from Pakistan, because in Pakistan this process is all automated, artificial intelligence based, where there is no personal interview of a thing, no human interaction. It's all machine generated question answers, whatever the procedure. Shakuda, you must know about it. Why this discrimination between two neighboring countries in Pakistan and in India? And this is something which is brought to my notice directly from the universities here in Canada. Because they say, those universities say, we don't want to waste our time and on the Pakistani students, because the government system to bring students from Pakistan does not work for Pakistan.
Just for clarification, there's a couple things that I did, including recently removing the student direct stream, just because of the reforms that I've made to the system that included addressing the issue that you've highlighted very eloquently, frankly, about fraud and verifying application letters and making sure that the institutions that are welcoming them, we are actually checking that these are true letters of verification. It was one of the first reforms that I made. So that has been able to catch a good chunk and clear instances of fraud. There was a statistic that came out a few months ago that clearly said we were able to catch clear instances of fraud, some of the most egregious, fake letters, etc. That wasn't being verified as well as it should be, and was a shortcoming in the system that allowed some people to come here and show up with this letter, mostly unwittingly, thinking that they were going to University X, whatever it was, and it allowed bad actors to thrive. I've currently given more powers to the College of Immigration Consultants to crack down on this. This is a recent regulatory change. Those are people within Canada that are regulated. It's a little more difficult to catch instances of fraud that are occurring outside the country. Indeed, there are reports that the government of India has cracked down on one particular instance of that, and so be it, they should. Illegality is illegality, and we have to make sure that we are cracking down both internally and making sure that the conditions don't exist externally, so that we don't catch it before people come here and are duped. The cases that came up under Minister Fraser were ones that were investigated to make sure that the students involved were not complicit, and those that weren't were allowed to stay. That is a process that is, I think, largely complete. But again, these were shortcomings in the system where we saw people exploiting vulnerabilities, and mostly vulnerabilities of kids that weren't aware of the process for the most part in coming here. And I believe that largely that is caught. But I think what I've learned in the last year and a half is that we have to remain vigilant, because there are always ways to work around the system. On instances of fairness, there's a number of sources for where that perception can arise, notably in, I would say, universities and colleges have been going to one or two source countries and constantly going back to the well on that. We expect a diversity of students. It doesn't mean that Indian students aren't some of the best and brightest. Indeed, one of the largest populations in the world, you would expect students to come from India. But what I've asked universities and colleges to do is you need to put a little more effort into the price of acquisition, to use probably an expression that isn't entirely fitting, but you have to be able to invest more in the talent that you're bringing here. And that includes going to more countries and expanding your resources. And that is a message that is ongoing as universities and colleges are asked to not only rebrand, but change their pitch
to attract people from around the world from different countries. There will always be students from India, there will always be students from Pakistan. That fairness and balance isn't totally up to me, but it is one that I am watching closely because there are students that are coming from those countries that could be really important to contribute.
Thank you, sir. But the question is, the universities say that the rejection in Pakistan, because of the automation of the system, that is more, so they don't want to invest.
I'd have to verify those rates and check that. It's something that it isn't unique to, if that is truly the case. There are countries where you do have higher rejection rates. We are seeing rejection rates that are higher across the board. I think with the new set of reforms, it will make a little more of a playing field. I wouldn't necessarily draw a conclusion, although I wouldn't criticize people for making the comment, but I wouldn't draw a direct conclusion based on how many people are on the ground now, because a lot of our decision is currently through our global system. 90% of some of the processing is done without, well, obviously putting foils on passports is important, but a lot of the decision making is not made in the country in question.
Thank you.
That's coming in the spring.
And about the other reforms that you are talking about?
So, most require, I would say, because I have significant discretion, perhaps not as much as people think, a lot of the decisions that I take do not need me to go to Parliament. Sometimes it's important to check with legislators. Were I to do dramatic asylum reform in Canada, that would need to go to Parliament. I would say, unfortunately, I did try some asylum reform last June, and the Conservatives, the Bloc Québécois, and the NDP opposed it. So we are where we are now, despite some efforts that we've made. I plan to do more if I can, if Parliament comes back, but I wouldn't if you want to blame prorogation, you can look at the last 6 months and you can see the stalling that Pierre Poilievre has put into place. And frankly, he's been irresponsible on immigration, promising visas to everyone that he talks to, depending on what community he goes to. So that's highly irresponsible, or more flights to India, or whatever he seems to go around promising, depending on what radio station he goes on. I'm trying to be honest to people, and if they don't like the news that I have, then they can make the decision they want. But in order to be a politician that is responsible to Canadian people, you have to be honest to people, and I don't see that with Pierre Poilievre. Again, on asylum reform, if I need to do something dramatic, I will have to go in front of Parliament. But when it comes to the LMIA, I don't have to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, the last one, please. Quick and short, please.
Yes, definitely. So they can contribute to Canadian workforce.
Super important in healthcare, and even in construction. We have a very, very regulated country for a lot of good reasons, for safety reasons, for make sure Canadians, when they're getting healthcare, is some of the best in the world. There are some provinces that are working to make sure they break down some of the barriers. I think that is very, very important. Despite everything I try and say, these are responsibilities that are provincial, and I think it's in their interest to do it. And I've seen some hopeful work done in Alberta. I've seen some work that's being done in BC and some other provinces to make sure that the people that we are recruiting abroad with the skill set they have and the training they have can work a little more seamlessly in Canada than they have been able to in the past, and not take a pay cut in order to do something that they are overqualified to do. We're not there yet. It's not perfect. I would beware of any federal politician that comes in front of you and says, I have a magic wand that can wave, because provinces do have their responsibilities and jurisdiction. But there is some work being done with the provinces, and it doesn't mean the federal government should wash their hands of it. We have a number of initiatives where we bring in provinces and we say, well, if you want these people, you have to make sure that you eliminate the barriers so that they can properly work in the jobs that they've been promised. But I wouldn't say we're there yet perfectly. We compete with other countries for talent that don't have those barriers. So it isn't like it's a luxury for us. It's something that we have to make sure that we are being competitive on without compromising important safety reasons that create that regulation in the first place.